Views expressed are those of the host, guests, and callers, not necessarily those of News Radio 1040 WHO.
Good morning, friends. Welcome back to the conversation. We're going to be talking with Congressman Ron Paul. Dr. Paul is our in-studio guest. Very prolific writer, scholar, and thinker on so many different areas. A best-selling writer and researcher. He's been you had newsletters for years and years too, didn't you?
Yes. In between the time I was in Congress the first time, and I left there in #84, and up until '96 when I went back in, I did a newsletter.
Where do you find time to write? I mean, because you must write a lot. You must set aside some time every single day for this.
Well, it's frustrating right now because I can't find as much time, but I save my notes and make my plans as soon as I get a break. But sometimes you get time on airplanes, and you have to take a spare moment and use it.
Do you go first class, or do you go you ride the cattle cars with the rest of us, or where do you go?
In order to get everywhere that I have to go, I have to go in my Cessna 150.
Oh, you have a pilot, and they get you really fast.
Yeah.
You have a huge advantage. The biggest news in the last 24-hour news cycle. I'll get you into the money issues here in just a moment, because the huge things are going on even as we speak in the dollar and the money issues. But the biggest political event over the last 24-hour news cycle was the capture and killing of Muammar Gadhafi. This is awful. It sounds terrible. But this is the sound of his death. God is great, and as they shot him and riddled his body with holes. What do you think about that? How do we process that?
My first thoughts are that it doesn't bode well for the future of Libya. I mean, if that's the reaction. And I think it's a shame about our participation. I think in self-determination, the people of Libya should determine, who their leader is and what to do. It's a shame that the transition is the way it is. But our involvement, our president got us involved without any permission or any consultation with the Congress. And he used an international body, both the UN and NATO troops, and used our money. I mean, we're responsible for that because they couldn't have done it without us and our money. And therefore,
about 80%.
Yes, the president takes all the credit for killing him. But at the same time, is he going to assume the responsibility for the chaos and the civil war that most likely will pursue? Because there's far from stability there. I think it's going to last a long time. I just don't believe in world government, and I don't believe that presidents should do anything without the proper procedure by going to the Congress and getting authority to do what he ever thinks he should do.
That position attracted the favorable attention of Sarah Palin, who said,
well, again, I think that there's a lot of inconsistency and murky foreign policy coming out of this White House. And, you got to hand it to Ron Paul. Whether you agree with everything that he says or not, at least he is one there in Congress trying to make our president stick to the law and understand that Congress does have a role to play in these foreign policy decisions that are made. And Ron Paul, I think, has hit the nail on the head when he's come out and said that Obama had better be careful when he interjects himself and our country in other nations' business.
So are we going to see a Paul Palin ticket?
Well,
or Palin Paul?
When I see her, I'll have to thank her for that.
Her central point is, as you just said, you don't like international involvement, and you got to have constitutional authority to do anything, or you at least should just strive for that.
Yeah, at least in the past we pretended. I think why it's so dangerous now is there's not even been a pretense by the president. He just assumes that he has this authority and he just sort of flaunts it. So to me, that's very disappointing.
That's an interesting observation too. Is it not? Is your earphones too loud?
Mine comes in and out.
Oh, I'm sorry. His earphones are cutting in and out here. The other part of the reason I was following up on that is I heard Jesse Jackson Jr. talking about the president's authority. And I would like you to evaluate this, because he was being asked about the issue of the jobs bill, and Jesse Jackson Jr., who's one of your colleagues, was talking about the president and his authority and what he should be doing.
President Obama tends to idealize, and rightfully so, Abraham Lincoln.
You're not able to hear that?
I'm not getting anything.
Okay, well, we'll just chase it real
switch.
fast. I apologize for the technical snafu. But he was asked, Jesse Jackson Jr. was being asked about what the president's powers are relative to some of these issues.
President Obama tends to idealize, and rightfully so, Abraham Lincoln, who looked at states in rebellion, and he made a judgment that the government of the United States, while the states are in rebellion, still had an obligation to function. On several occasions now, we've seen, quite frankly, the Congress is in rebellion, determined, as Abraham Lincoln said, to wreck or ruin at all costs. I believe, quite frankly, in the direct hiring of 15 million unemployed Americans. When we recognize that the Congress is in rebellion, I think the President of the United States will follow the correct course. He's doing that now. He's looking administratively for ways to advance the causes of the American people, because this Congress is completely dysfunctional.
That's an amazing point. He says if you don't agree with the philosophy of this president, you are in rebellion, and he should, in essence, take the power in his own hands.
That's called dictatorship, and that endorses the use of force to bring about anything you so choose. It's exactly the opposite of what a free society is supposed to be about. It's very dangerous talk.
When that talk is delivered in front of an audience, it gets ovations.
Now, that's even more frightening. But when I get out and talk to a few people, like a lot of people, I can get applause for exactly the opposite, and that's what the real contest is going on in this country today. Those who want more government to solve the problems that the government created versus those who are now looking at our traditions of freedom and saying we've had too much government, we don't have enough freedom, we spend too much money, we have too much debt, and we want to go in the opposite direction, and that has to be resolved, because right now we cannot continue to live the way we've been living.
One of our listeners brings us to that exact point. The way we have been living, and we can't continue. This is Terry. You're talking with Congressman Ron Paul. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, gentlemen. Hey, I had a question about what Scott Mickelson called in and let us know about yesterday about this derivative deposits that these 5 major banks are making. And I guess I don't know enough about derivatives either, but it struck me and alarmed me that one of my representatives from Iowa, Mr. King, said he didn't understand them either. Are we now playing beyond fake money? Are we now dealing with monopoly money? I mean, are these things legal tender that you can deposit them into a bank and get them FDIC insured, even if they're not? Mm-hmm. I mean, this is borderline insanity that we're doing here. And if he's right about the numbers he's talking, can somebody explain to me how we're ever going to see the end of a $250 trillion hole?
These are great questions, and for getting the listeners up to speed in 2 different issues. Thank you, Terry, for bringing that up. There's 2 different levels to this part of the conversation. One is what we were talking about yesterday. According to Bloomberg, Bank of America had one of its subsidiary units downgraded. It had its credit rating, in essence, downgraded. And so it moved the derivatives from the Merrill Lynch unit to a subsidiary that was insured. So the FDIC disagreed with the transfer, but the bank says it doesn't need their approval. And there was a University of Missouri, Kansas City regulator said the concern is there's always going to be an enormous temptation to dump the losers onto the insured institution. There is no law that is governing this. So all of these derivatives, I think there was $53 trillion worth of this stuff, they try to dump into insured deposits. So if this all goes bad, the taxpayers are at least partially on the hook.
No, they'll really be on the hook, and already we've had a lot of those derivatives dumped on us in 2008. You know, some of these mortgage derivatives ended up being bought by the Federal Reserve. It didn't even have to get the Congress involved. I mean, the Federal Reserve just did it to bail out some of the banks and the corporations that were involved. So no, this is a transfer, and this is why I voted against the repeal of Glass-Steagall, not because I'm against banks. In a free market, they can do different things and they can invest, but they should stand to lose if they lose. But when you have the lender of last resort and you have these guarantees and insurance backed up by the taxpayer, it just encourages this. And a derivative is just a wild bet. And there's nothing behind these bets. And they're backing up these bets and they're leveraged with taxpayers' money. So I think that this derivative thing will explode. And it'll be much, much worse than what we went through in 2008. And the fact that they did this shifting just recently means that they might think we're getting awfully close to that date when it will be unsustainable.
The Federal Reserve Board Governor Dan Tarullo yesterday he supported another large-scale purchase program of agency-backed, mortgage-backed securities to support the economy. So the Fed is asking they're asking, hey, go out there and buy this junk. That's supporting the economy because they know that if something doesn't happen, there's another round of there's another mortgage bubble. It's a second-tier mortgage bubble that those funds have been downgraded by some 40% in the last few weeks.
To me, the amazing thing is why there's any confidence at all. There's not much confidence. There's no confidence in the business community and the investors. They know that the economy is weak and shaky. But why is there so much confidence still, in the dollar standard and that we'll bail out everybody? We're getting lined up to bail out the European banks, with their sovereign debt crisis.
How do we bail them? With what do we bail them out?
It's always the dollar, and it's always through the Federal Reserve. I mean,